Hello Superset Maniacs and welcome back to my channel. Ranking the best bodybuilders of all time will always be tough for a number of reasons, of course, one of the most obvious one being the knowledge about nutrition and drugs that constantly evolved throughout the years, throughout the 50 plus years of history of the Mr. Olympia event, which is the best and most prestigious bodybuilding show. I'm not gonna discuss anything that happened before the Mr. Olympia event was created here in this video. Ranking different era bodybuilders is also difficult because of how the industry as a whole has evolved throughout the years. For example, there's like 15 to 20 competitors nowadays at the Olympia, or even more than that in some cases, while there were cases in the 60s and 70s where only 1 or 2 participants were entering this show. Nowadays we also have all these different divisions like the classic physique or the 212 division, while in the 90s and 2000s anyone who wanted to make a name for himself in bodybuilding had to do the main class, which nowadays is called the men's open division, meaning those lineups were probably more competitive. Last but not least, bodybuilding is mainly a subjective sport, if we can call it a sport, of course. There is nothing objective here, like scoring a goal or knocking your opponent out, decisions being taken solely on the judges' opinions about someone's physique. Having said that, all those debates we usually have in the comment section about why someone is better than another are basically debating opinions, which is silly to be honest. Actually, it's not silly debating someone's opinion, but arguing with someone based on opinions. Anyway, you get the point, guys. This is bodybuilding, but we also are human beings after all, and debates, rankings, statistics and numbers are in our human nature. So it's always fun to compare things if we keep the negativity away. And here at Superset Man, we're all grown up people, right? Having said all that, who is the greatest bodybuilder of all time? Well, I have 6 contenders for you guys today, and I bet choosing 6 is debatable enough, let alone only one, but in my opinion, based on legacy, track record, influence to the sport, and of course the physique, the 6 greatest bodybuilders of all time are Arnold Schwarzenegger, Haney, Dorian Yates, Ronnie Coleman, Cutler, and Heath. Of course, there are many other bodybuilding legends like Sergio Oliva, Dexter Jackson, Frank Zane, or some crowned Mr. Olympias like Flex Wheeler or Kevin Levrone. But we had to stop at some point, and honestly, as good as these guys I just mentioned may be, could you put any of them above the top 6 I chose here? I personally wouldn't. Anyway, I feel like we already spent too much time with the introduction, so let's get to the video. What I'm gonna do in this video is compare these 6 bodybuilding legends in the 8 mandatory poses. I know we cannot fairly compare Arnold from the 70s with Heath, for example, but what I'm gonna try to do is to choose the winner of any pose based on how good they were for their respective era. This is gonna be difficult and also controversial, but I hope you guys are aware that I'm doing this only for fun. I'm not trying to do anything else than entertain you guys and also give you a reason to discuss this interesting subject in our beautiful industry in a positive and constructive way, of course. So without further ado, let's get to the poses. First pose is the front double biceps. I believe Dorian Yates is last in this pose. He's got the weakest biceps and doesn't have any other standout features in this pose other than his great lats maybe. Phil is 5th here in spite of his great guns, but his narrow structure and unaesthetic looking midsection kinda ruined the overall flow he should have in this pose. Cutler is 4th. He's got great arms development and a nice sunk in midsection, but his blocky physique is mainly the reason he's not higher in this list. Haney is 3rd as he is nowhere near at Ronnie or Arnold's level when it comes to the guns. He's probably the second worst at this department after Dorian Yates, but his great V-taper with that tiny waist and wide shoulders and also the vacuum pose took him all the way up to 3rd spot. Arnold Schwarzenegger vs Ronnie Coleman in the front double biceps pose. Of course Ronnie would win this any day as they look here, but as I mentioned already, for this comparison to be possible, we have to take into consideration the eras they were competing in. I believe Arnold's front double is more notorious. He was way ahead of anyone else from his era in this pose. I also think his biceps were bigger than Ronnie's, and I said his biceps, not his whole arm. He's got a little vacuum going on there, so yes, Arnold wins this pose and Ronnie places second in my opinion. Front lat spread. Phil Heath is last as his narrowness brings the worst out of him again. Arnold is 5th as he was never known for having a great front lat spread pose. Cutler is 4th. He's probably the widest in this lineup, but he's got that blocky frame that wouldn't allow him climb higher than this in this pose. Ronnie Coleman is 3rd. He's one of the best of all time in this pose, but if we're taking into consideration the context of the era they were competing in, there are Haney and Dorian Yates who are the best 2 of all time when it comes to this pose. And as good and aesthetically may look here, especially with that vacuum, there is no way you can beat Dorian Yates in this pose. His lats simply look twice the size of anyone else here. From the front of course. Dorian Yates wins the front lat spread. Side chest pose, and this is gonna be controversial. Dorian Yates is last in this pose as this was one if not his actual weakest pose. Phil and Jay are 4th and 5th. It can go either way between the two, but I believe Phil's superior delts and arms are enough to give him the edge over Jay. And now between Arnold, Haney and Ronnie, it really can go either way. I don't know, but I'm going with Ronnie in 3rd, Haney in 2nd and Arnold 1st. The side chest was more of a signature pose for Arnold and Haney than for Ronnie Coleman. And between the two, I'm going with Arnold for his legendary unmatched chest development. And we turn to the back. For the back double biceps pose, and aside from the fact that I believe Jay is a clear last place here, this is gonna be very difficult to judge. Arnold looks so incredibly good here, presenting a striated Christmas tree in the back double biceps pose. But he gets 5th. He was never known for having an outstanding back. This is gonna be upsetting for some of you, but Haney is 4th, as I believe only Samir Banu can challenge Dorian, Ronnie and Phil when it comes to the back. Phil Heath is 3rd. He may be better than that, but as we established that for this comparison to be possible, we have to take into consideration other aspects like the era and the influence they had with any certain pose in their eras, so I believe Dorian and Ronnie are better than him. As for Dorian versus Ronnie, it will always be debatable of course, but I believe Dorian's back double was the most feared and the most dominant in any bodybuilding era, so Dorian Yates wins this pose. The rear lat spread pose, and this time Arnold is gonna be last. The lat spreads were not his favorite poses, he was not very effective in them. Cutler is 5th and Haney is 4th again. For me, Phil is 3rd in this other back pose as well. I always said that his 2017 rear lat spread is the best ever for me. This right here is 2013 for reference, but in the lat spreads, people tend to value the width the most, in which Phil is no match to Dorian and Ronnie. Between Dorian Yates and Ronnie Coleman, it could go either way. Dorian has arguably the better lats, but I believe Ronnie has the better pose overall. This is Ronnie's lights out game over pose. Side triceps, and for me Haney is last, as aside from his weak lateral head, he's got weaker shoulders as well, unlike Ronnie and Arnold who are 5th and 4th in this pose. Jay Cutler is third. I like how he looks in this pose, but I believe Dorian and Phil are just better than him. Between Dorian and Phil, I don't know, both of them are known for having some of the greatest side triceps poses ever, but objectively speaking, Phil has the way superior tricep development. The arms and shoulders overall that are visible in this pose as well. So for me, Phil is the best of all time in the side triceps. Abs and thighs, and neither of these 6 greatest bodybuilders of all time had a world-class abs and thighs pose. They were never considered to have one of the best abs and thighs in their eras. Without too much talk, Ronnie is 6th. His midsection always left him down. Phil is 5th, and it's true that in the beginning of his career he had a small waist, but he always had unnecessary abs and a weak V-taper. Arnold is 4th, as he never had the best abs or the best thighs. Dorian is 3rd in this pose, decent abs, great V-taper, but not the best legs in my opinion, especially in the second part of his Olympia reign, when he had several bodybuilders with better legs than him. And we have Haney and Jay Cutler with 2 different types of physiques. Haney has the greatest V-taper and some good set of quads for his era, while Jay was blocky indeed but had the best quads ever probably and a very ripped midsection. I'm going with Haney in first and Jay in second, and for those of you who say they both have pretty weak ab and thigh poses, I agree. All 6 of them have pretty weak poses, but I had to rank them somehow. The most muscular. This hasn't always been a mandatory pose, but bodybuilders had always hit this pose, so we're gonna judge it anyway. Dorian Yates is the last and Haney is 5th. They were never very effective in this pose. Jay Cutler is 4th, and we remain with Arnold, Ronnie and Phil. 3 different generations, 3 different body types, but all 3 very impressive in this pose. I'm gonna judge this again by how influential and decisive their poses were in their respective eras, so Arnold 3rd, Ronnie 2nd and Phil Heath is 1st. If we add up all the numbers, each of them won in each pose, the final score looks like this, and this being bodybuilding, the lesser points the better. Once again, this was only for fun, this is just how I view things. I don't know if there can necessarily be right or wrong, but I could be wrong of course. The winner is Ronnie Coleman with 24 points, followed by Dorian and Haney with both with 27 points, closely followed by Phil Heath with 28 and Arnold with 29. Honestly, I was expecting Arnold to be higher in this list, but when I drew the line, this is what I got. And Jay Cutler is last with 33 points. What do you guys think about this comparison? Does it make any kind of sense? I don't know, but like I mentioned in the beginning, this was an experimental try only for entertaining, but I encourage you to leave your opinions in the comment section. Also like the video and subscribe to the channel, and as always, thank you guys and see you next time.